In the year 636, a quiet plain near the deep ravines of the Yarmouk River became the stage for a moment that would reshape the heart of the Middle East. There, two great powers stood facing one another: the Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome, and the young Rashidun Caliphate, only a few years removed from the passing of the Prophet Muhammad in 632. For the Byzantines, Syria had been a prized province for centuries. Its cities, its trade routes, its farms, these were the lifeblood of the empire's eastern frontier. For the Muslims, Syria held a different meaning. It was the first great challenge beyond the borders of Arabia, a test of unity after the Prophet's death, and a chance to secure the young state under the leadership of Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab. The campaigns began under the first caliph, Abu Bakr. Muslim armies moved north with care and coordination, avoiding wasteful battles, choosing ground wisely, and relying on speed rather than sheer numbers. Their early victories, at Ajnadain, at Damascus, and later at Fal in Palestine, opened a path deep into the Levant. But these advances came at a time when the region was still recovering from long wars between Byzantium and Persia. Emperor Heraclius could not allow Syria to fall without a fight. He gathered a large army, led by trusted commanders drawn from Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, and Arab Christian allies. By mid-636, his forces pushed south. The Muslim troops, under Abu Ubayda's authority and with Khalid ibn al-Walid directing battlefield operations, withdrew toward the southern plains near the Yarmouk Gorge. There, on open ground edged by cliffs and narrow passes, they prepared to stand. What neither side knew at that moment was that this battle would become a turning point, a struggle where discipline, nerve, and timing mattered more than numbers, a confrontation where one commander's decisions would echo through the centuries. The calm before the storm did not last long. The armies had arrived, the land was chosen, and both sides understood that what was about to unfold would decide the fate of Syria. After the Prophet Muhammad passed away in 632, the young Muslim community faced a moment of uncertainty. Yet under the leadership of Caliph Abu Bakr, unity was restored, and the Arabian tribes stood together once more. With the homeland secured, attention turned northward, toward the lands of Syria. These early campaigns were not reckless raids. They were carefully planned movements. Small Muslim armies advanced along key routes, choosing their battles, avoiding positions where the Byzantines could overwhelm them. The commanders relied on discipline, speed, and an ability to shift direction quickly, qualities that larger imperial armies often lacked. But as the months passed, it became clear that their initial numbers were too modest. The Byzantines responded with stronger forces, and the Muslim commanders sent word south. They needed reinforcements, and a leader capable of unifying the scattered fronts. The answer came in the form of Khalid ibn al-Walid. Khalid, already known for his campaigns in Iraq, left that region and marched across desert terrain to Syria. His arrival changed the rhythm of the war. He reorganized the scattered Muslim detachments and moved with a confidence that inspired both veterans and new recruits. Victories followed in quick succession. In July, the Byzantines were defeated at Ajnadain. Not long after, Damascus, one of the region's great cities, fell to the Muslims in September. Then came the battle at Fal, where the last significant Byzantine garrison in Palestine was broken and forced into retreat. These successes opened the door to wider control of the Levant. When Abu Bakr passed away, the new caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, continued the mission. Although Khalid had been effective, Umar reassigned overall command in Syria to Abu Ubayda, a man respected for his gentleness and his strategic mind. Khalid remained the foremost battlefield commander, taking charge whenever danger pressed close. Under this leadership, the Muslims advanced farther. Southern Palestine was secured. Tiberias surrendered. Baalbek offered little resistance. Early in 636, Emesa also fell. By then, the Muslim presence in Syria was no longer a temporary expedition. It was a genuine foothold, one that threatened Byzantine power in the entire region. Emperor Heraclius, ruling from the distant capital, understood the seriousness of the moment. He could not allow Syria, a province long tied to the empire, to slip away. And so, he prepared a response that would gather men from across his dominions and send them south to restore imperial rule. That army was already on the move. A confrontation was coming. By the spring of 636, news of the Muslim advance had reached Emperor Heraclius. For him, the loss of Syria was unthinkable. This land had fed the empire, supplied its armies, and stood as a shield for more than 600 years. If Syria fell, the eastern frontier of Byzantium would be left exposed. Determined to reverse these defeats, Heraclius called upon every ally he could. He gathered soldiers from Anatolia, Armenia, the Slavic lands, and from Arab Christian tribes loyal to the empire. It was one of the largest forces assembled in the region since his earlier wars with Persia. Command of this army was given to an Armenian general, Vahan. Experienced, respected, steady in temperament, he was expected to restore imperial authority in Syria. As Vahan marched south, his army spread across the landscape in three great divisions. The right wing, Greek forces under General Gregory. These troops formed a disciplined, cohesive line, supported by cavalry stationed slightly behind, ready to exploit any weakness. The center, Armenian and Ghassanid Arab units, led by Jabala and Dayajan, they held the heart of the formation. Their job was to anchor the line and prevent any breakthrough. The left wing, Slavic troops under Prince Kanatir hardy fighters, strong in close combat, supported by mounted contingents in the rear. Altogether, Byzantine numbers are estimated around 60,000. It was a formidable host, broad, deep, and confident in its strength. When the Muslim commanders learned of Vahan's advance, they understood the danger immediately. Their forces, stretched across several towns and regions, were smaller and more dispersed. If they stood and fought in different places, they risked defeat in detail. So Abu Ubayda and Khalid made a deliberate choice. They withdrew, not in panic, not in disorder, but step by step, gathering all detachments and falling back toward the southern plains near the Yarmouk Gorge. It was a place where the ground narrowed, where cliffs cut across the landscape, and where mobility mattered more than raw numbers. There, a larger army would struggle to maneuver. There, light cavalry, Khalid's greatest strength, could still dominate the field. This withdrawal also pulled the Byzantine army farther away from their bases and supply lines. By early summer, both armies arrived at the Yarmouk plain. The Byzantines deployed in a wide, proud arc, their banners catching the morning wind. The Muslims formed a thinner line opposite them, smaller in number, but composed of men hardened by years of continuous campaigning. It was clear to all that a decisive encounter was coming. The emperor wanted Syria back. The Muslims wanted to defend what they had gained. Neither side intended to leave without a fight. But before swords were drawn, both armies would spend weeks locked in a different kind of struggle. Not of steel, but of words, caution, and strategy. That would be the beginning of the next chapter. Before either side committed to a full battle, the armies spent weeks facing one another across the Yarmouk plain. Although the Byzantines held the larger force, General Vahan did not rush to attack. He had been instructed by Emperor Heraclius to try something else first. Delay the fighting for as long as possible. The emperor hoped that, if enough time passed, reinforcements from the Sasanian Empire might reach Syria. Although Persia and Byzantium had been bitter enemies for generations, the sudden rise of the Muslim armies pushed them into an uneasy understanding. If both empires suffered defeat, the Muslims would spread across the entire region. So Vahan tried to stall, but the Muslims too were waiting for reinforcements coming from the south. Every day that passed allowed more Arab soldiers to join Khalid and Abu Ubayda. So both sides found themselves trapped in a strange balance. Each needed more time, but neither could afford to show weakness. Messengers rode back and forth between the two camps. Vahan offered food, gifts, and gold if the Muslims would simply return to Arabia. He believed that generosity might spare the empire from a costly war. The Muslim commanders declined. Their mission was not plunder, but the securing of Syria, territory they believed would no longer be safe if the Byzantines regrouped. Yet the talks continued. Days stretched into weeks. Weeks turned into nearly 3 months. Behind the stillness, both armies prepared quietly for the inevitable. At last, Vahan requested a direct meeting with Khalid ibn al-Walid. The two men stood between the lines, surrounded by officers, each trying to judge the other's strength and resolve. During this meeting, an Armenian officer stepped forward and spoke harshly. He described the Arabs as poor wanderers of the desert, unworthy of challenging the empire. He offered food and wealth if they would simply withdraw. The insult hung heavily in the air. For older viewers, it is easy to imagine the tension of that moment. Two worlds confronting each other, each certain of its own destiny. Khalid answered with calm conviction. He called on Vahan to accept Islam and live in peace. If not, he warned, war would follow, and the Byzantines would face warriors who did not fear death. Vahan dismissed these words with equal firmness. Better armies than this, he claimed, had tried to take Roman land and failed. The meeting ended. No agreement had been reached, and both commanders knew that negotiations had served their purpose. The time for waiting was over. Vahan positioned his main camp near al-Ula, a location that allowed him to guard one of the old Roman roads linking Egypt and Syria. His troops were arranged along the river valleys and ridges, forming a wide and solid line. Across the field, the Muslims prepared in their own way. Their line was thinner, but their morale remained unbroken. Veterans from Iraq, Arabia, and Syria stood side by side, each understanding that the coming battle would decide the fate of an entire region. Before the armies clashed, several Muslim fighters stepped forward to challenge Byzantine officers to single combat. Some duels were accepted. A number of Byzantine officers fell in these early encounters, stirring anger and frustration in the imperial camp. These small losses pushed Vahan to act. He ordered his great army into battle formation. The long peace between the two camps had ended. The 6-day struggle of Yarmouk was about to begin. When the long months of waiting finally ended, the armies met at last on the field. The opening day was cautious. Vahan pushed his troops forward only to test the Muslim line. The Muslims held firm, and by evening both sides withdrew with few losses. But beneath the surface, tension was rising. At dawn, Vahan attempted a surprise attack, hoping to catch the Muslims before they formed ranks. But Khalid's scouts had already warned him, and the Muslims were ready. Vahan's plan for this day was straightforward: fix the Muslim center and crush both wings. On the Muslim right, Amr ibn al-As faced the Slavic troops under Kanatir. The Slavs advanced in deep lines, pushing the Muslims back toward their own camp. Amr sent his cavalry to help, but even then the Byzantines continued to advance. At this critical moment, women from the Muslim camp rushed out, some calling out, others driving camels forward. The sight and movement of the large animals unsettled the Byzantine horses and disrupted their formation. The line faltered, and this brief pause allowed Khalid to strike. Seeing a small opening between Kanatir's troops and the Byzantine center, Khalid ordered a sudden flanking attack. Amr pressed from the front. Khalid struck from the side, and the Slavic troops were forced to retreat in good order. The right flank had survived, but as the right stabilized, the left began to collapse. Gregory's Greek troops moved forward steadily, driving Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan's men back toward the camp. Again, The women behind the lines called out to the retreating soldiers, pushing them to stand firm. Khalid rode across the battlefield with a fast cavalry unit. Before reaching the left, he sent Dirar ibn al-Azwar with a smaller group to strike the flank of the Byzantine center. This prevented Gregory from receiving reinforcements. Once Khalid arrived, his cavalry charged directly into the Greek lines. Under this pressure, Gregory's troops withdrew, leaving the Muslim left battered but still intact. In the center, the Armenian commander Diajan fell in combat, a heavy blow for the Byzantine army. Day 3, heavy cavalry and a narrow escape. On the third day, Vahan concentrated his strength against the Muslim right. Jabala's Ghassanids and Kanatir's Slavs advanced together, supported by armored cataphracts who crashed into the lighter Muslim cavalry. For a moment, the right flank seemed close to collapse, but Khalid noticed that Jabala's line had stretched too far, exposing its side. He launched his cavalry into that opening. The sudden attack forced the Ghassanids to fall back. Without their support, the Slavs withdrew as well. What had begun as a promising Byzantine assault dissolved under Khalid's perfectly timed counterstroke. By the fourth day, both armies were worn down. Even so, Vahan repeated his earlier strategy. Heavy assaults on the Muslim right, slower pressure elsewhere. This time, however, he added a new tactic. He sent forward large numbers of archers to rain volleys upon the Muslim left. The barrage tore through Yazid's and Abu Ubayda's men, forcing them to pull back simply to escape the arrows. Gregory immediately advanced. Yazid's troops, weakened by days of fighting, broke and began to retreat. Once again, women from the camp stepped forward, calling out, urging the men to stand. Their presence steadied the line, but the left flank remained dangerously thin. Meanwhile, Khalid committed himself fully to the crisis on the right, where another collapse would have doomed the entire army. His arrival stabilized that wing, but it left the left exposed. By late afternoon, however, the Byzantines themselves grew tired. Gregory ordered his men to withdraw, and the intense fighting finally eased. The Muslims had endured 4 days of relentless pressure. They had lost many men, and their line had bent repeatedly, but it had not broken. The Byzantines, despite superior numbers, had failed to shatter either flank. Both armies now knew that the coming day would decide everything. When the 5th morning arrived, the battlefield lay silent. 4 days of fighting had drained both armies, and neither side wished to begin another struggle immediately. Sensing the strain within his own ranks, General Vahan sent an envoy to the Muslim camp. He proposed a truce, an end to the fighting before more blood was spilled. For the Byzantines, it was a chance to regroup. For the Muslims, it was a moment of hesitation. The Muslim commanders gathered in council. Their forces were tired. Their numbers were reduced. Some believed that accepting a truce might spare lives and allow time to rebuild. Khalid ibn al-Walid listened quietly. Then he spoke. The 4 days behind them, he said, had proven the resolve of his soldiers. The Byzantines had failed to break the line despite greater numbers. Now, when the enemy's confidence was shaken, was not the time to retreat. It was the time to strike decisively. To prepare for this final effort, Khalid took one critical step. He sent Dirar ibn al-Azwar with 500 cavalry to block the bridge across the Rakad Gorge, the narrow path connecting the Byzantine army to its camp and supply routes. If the Byzantines were pushed back, they would find their escape route closed. The trap was set. The decisive day approached. At dawn on the 6th day, the battlefield stirred once more. General Gregory of the Byzantine right rode forward and challenged the Muslims to single combat. Abu Ubayda, the overall Muslim commander in Syria, accepted the duel. Before leaving, he told Khalid that command would return to him if he did not survive. The two men met in the center of the field. After a fierce exchange, Abu Ubayda struck the decisive blow, killing Gregory. The sight shook the Byzantine ranks. Seeing the moment, Khalid ordered the entire Muslim line to advance. During the night, he had spread his infantry to appear stronger and placed small cavalry groups behind them to confuse Byzantine scouts. The enemy believed they still faced a full-strength force, but the true power lay elsewhere. Khalid had concentrated nearly all remaining cavalry on the flanks, hidden in the shallow dips of the plateau. As the infantry engaged, he gave the signal. 8,000 Muslim riders swept around the Byzantine left, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Vahan looked to his flank and realized the danger too late. He tried to send reinforcements, but Khalid's cavalry moved too quickly. Kanatir's Slavic troops were the first to be enveloped. They fought bravely, but were overwhelmed on all sides. Jabala's Ghassanids withdrew in disorder, hoping to escape across the Rakkad bridge, only to find the crossing blocked by Dirar's small cavalry force, just as Khalid had planned. Panic spread through the Byzantine line. Some units tried to flee toward the cliffs of the Yarmouk Gorge. Others broke apart under the pressure of the advancing Muslim cavalry. The once mighty army dissolved into confusion. Seeing the collapse, Vahan retreated with a small escort, leaving the field lost. Khalid paused, whispered a prayer of thanks, and watched as the last resistance faded. The Battle of Yarmouk was over. It marked the end of Byzantine rule in Syria and opened a new chapter in the history of the region. When the noise of battle finally faded, the plain of Yarmouk lay silent. The Byzantine army, once drawn from every corner of the empire, had been shattered. Only scattered survivors reached the safety of distant towns. For many, the deep ravines and broken ground of the battlefield became their final resting place. Emperor Heraclius received the news far away in Antioch. The defeat struck him deeply. He understood what it meant. Syria, held by Rome for centuries, was lost. In sorrow, he ordered his remaining forces to withdraw from the region. The empire would never again regain these lands. For the Muslims, Yarmouk opened a new chapter. The road to Damascus, Homs, and eventually Jerusalem stood unguarded. Under Caliph Umar and his commanders, Abu Ubayda, Khalid, and others, town after town accepted Muslim rule. The Levant, once a frontier of empires, now became part of the growing Islamic world. The battle also shaped the legacy of Khalid ibn al-Walid. His leadership, swift decisions, bold maneuvers, and unshakable resolve became a model studied for generations. Even those who faced him in battle later recognized his brilliance. Yet for the older men who survived Yarmouk, the memory was not one of triumph alone. It was a reminder of how fragile armies can be, and how courage, discipline, and timing can outweigh numbers. It showed that history often turns on a few crucial choices, made in moments of exhaustion and danger. The plain of Yarmouk remains quiet today, but for those who know its story, it is a place where the destiny of an entire region changed in a single week. A week of struggle, loss, endurance, and decisive leadership. If you wish to hear more stories like this, a like or subscription helps the channel grow. And I welcome your thoughts below. Your perspective enriches these histories. Thank you for spending your time with me today.